I don't recommend that you mix using any hardware at all. I recommend that you stay completely 100% in the box. Hey man, are you fairly new to audio engineering and looking to get into your first piece of hardware besides your interface? Well, this video is going to help you to really determine what hardware gear is relevant and what you should buy. Hey man, before we begin this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to my sponsor, JZ Microphones. Thanks to my collaboration with JZ Microphones, you have the opportunity to win your own JZ Microphones BH2. All you got to do is follow the details in the description so that you can enter the win. Shout out to JZ Microphones. Make sure y'all check out their dope lineup of products. Now let's get back to the video. What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Wavy Wayne from WavyWayne.com, and this channel is all about helping you to record and mix better and faster. Today is absolutely no different. We're going to be tackling the big hardware discussion, man, because everybody wants to know, is recording with hardware or mixing with hardware better than just simply using plugins and staying all inside the box? And y'all want to know my honest opinion, because you look around, you see my studio, I got hardware everywhere in here, but the truth is I don't use it like you probably think. Or as much as you think, man. My opinion on this, really, I believe that the software is so advanced, the software is so good that there's not too much hardware that you absolutely must get. There's not too much hardware that you absolutely must have, and a lot of stuff can really be done with the software. So let's weigh out some of those benefits between like mixing with hardware or mixing with software. For one, I just think about myself in the workload that I have constantly. Every day I'm mixing at least 2 songs, right? So I'm moving back and forth between those 2 songs at different times. If I was using hardware doing the mix on every one of those songs, it would take me significantly longer to switch between projects because I have to recall settings. That literally means going to a piece of gear and changing the knobs on it, right? And saving those settings every time that I change it. Now, how do you save hardware settings? Because it's not like saving a plugin settings. To save hardware, what I do is I take a picture of it, send the picture from my phone to the computer, save it in the folder that the session is in, and then later I open up that picture, go to the gear, recall those settings, right? That process takes a lot of time. It probably takes me at least another 15 minutes after each session and another 15 minutes before each session just to get things right. And not to mention, if I don't take the picture exactly right, well then my recall settings are not gonna be exactly right either. And so it's a little bit of a tedious process. Ask any old school engineer who spent time recalling the SSL console and they'll tell you that, hey, the recalled mix is never the same as the first time that they did it. But there are some benefits to using hardware. Obviously, the randomness of hardware adds more characteristics. And what I mean by randomness is like, there's just some certain sonic variables that you don't get when you're working with software. When you're working with software, every time what you put in is gonna be what you get out. Every single time, and every time it's going to be consistent. It's the same sound every time with software. So if I use a distressor, a real hardware distressor, and something changes with it, maybe one of the components on the inside is starting to wear down, you know, one of the transformers or something, they're getting some age or tear, they need some changing, maybe there's some dirt on the knob or dirt on the input that actually adds to the grittiness of the sound. So that randomness, right, to where every piece of hardware actually sounds a little bit different, it adds to the characteristics of whatever it is that you're recording or mixing, right? That's not the same with plugins. With plugins, we simply get the exact same output every time, and that kind of stability is crucial in this world that we're working in, so we can always be expecting what we want to get out of certain pieces of gear. When I started my career, I was a little bit different, right? Because nowadays a lot of y'all are starting off in your home studios and you don't have a lot of exposure to hardware equipment, right? It means outboard compressors, EQs, reverb units, flangers, all kind of stuff that we would have in a big commercial facility like I came up in Quad and, you know, learned about while I went to school in Full Sail. As a home studio, you probably went out and first copped your interface, got you a microphone, and now you're trying to optimize your setup and trying to figure out what's best, right? That's what I'm going to guide you toward today. There are so many hardware processors out, a lot of which are now emulated as plugins. So you might be asking yourself still, why would I choose one over the other? Are all of the professionals using hardware and that's why they have a better sound? Or can I achieve similar or just as good results using software? And the answer, in short, is that yes, software can achieve nowadays just about everything that you can do with hardware. And you'll be hard pressed to find out anybody who can tell you that, hey, hardware is 100% better than mixing completely in the box. That's not the case anymore. And especially as we get more advanced with this technology in the future, that won't be the case at all. All right. So here is what I recommend if you are looking to get into hardware. There are some pieces and are some reasons why you still would want hardware today. And here's my use cases, okay? First thing first, I definitely recommend hardware front end. That means hardware preamp, hardware compression, and maybe some EQ if you are needing to do that. I don't necessarily EQ, but maybe getting a preamp that has an EQ built in is a good way to go. Now, when it comes to mixing, like I was explaining before, mixing using hardware is so much more tedious and time consuming. And in this fast paced, fast turnaround era that we're working in, especially for beginners, I don't recommend that you mix using any hardware at all. I recommend that you stay completely 100% in the box when it's time to mix. But on the front end, and by front end, I mean while you are recording, use hardware, capture big sounds, right? Capture big, huge sounds, record the sounds that you want to have before it enters into your DAW. Hey man, are you serious about growing your craft as an audio engineer? Do you want to learn tips, tricks, strategy, and more live in person from some of the biggest engineers in the game? Well, you don't want to miss MixNick 2023, where I'm going to have some of the biggest names in pro audio and audio engineering on a panel with giveaways, competitions, and more. This is all happening in Atlanta, Georgia on July 15th, 2023. Follow the link down in the description below so you can find out more details and register so you won't miss this amazing event. So to do that, like I was saying again, you might want to invest in some outboard preamps, maybe some compressors, maybe some EQ, all right? That would be the maximum that I would recommend that you do, especially as a beginner. Now, let's consider one thing. We got to talk about it, and it's going to be budget, right? Hardware is extremely more expensive than software. I can get a CL1B compressor for probably $200 or $300 as a plug-in, to where that actual unit is like $5,000, right? So you could be spending thousands and thousands of dollars on hardware and you ain't even mixed your first hit yet, right? So let's think about that and maybe work on some different approaches. One of my favorite approaches nowadays to hardware is going to be the 500 series. Now, 500 series, if you're not hip, this is like these little smaller modules that I have here on my desk, and don't mind my little rubber plug that I got in here because I needed to stop some sound from reflecting out of my empty gaps. But I'm gonna fill these up soon. But the 500 series modules, for one, they're much more inexpensive than getting the full rack units, okay? And they strip down to the components that you really need. The most vital parts of the revered, most beloved hardware are now being offered in the 500 series rack, right? So one of your first things that you should get, I recommend that you go out and get you a 500 series chassis. Now you can get these in an 8-slot chassis or a 6-slot chassis. I got a 6-slot chassis. Another reason that I really love this is because these things are extremely portable, right? You can literally take your sound with you wherever you go by using a 500 series rack. This particular unit that I'm using, this is the Rupert Neve Design R6. It even has patching capabilities so that it's basically your own little patch bay. You can reconfigure your setup however you want to, pull in cables, and
A few moments later.
Like I was saying, I really love the Rupert Neve Design R6. Not only does it have all of the power that you need to power up your 6 different 500 series modules, but it has this lovely patch bay on the back that allow you to reconfigure your setup very, very easily. Now, there are some really other dope 500 series chassis on the market, like the Craneborn Audio. They have one that is also an audio interface, which is, I just think that's really, really dope. You don't have to worry about any extra cables going in and out, because that is one thing to consider, right? Is like, are you gonna have enough inputs and outputs? But having that extra, having that Craneborn Audio actually be as an audio interface, man, that's dope. It handles pretty much everything for you, and that can save you some extra money if you're thinking about getting a new interface and also getting into hardware. So what are some of my favorite hardware modules? For one, I would say get you a assortment of preamps that you can use so that you can have variety. Preamps are like, you know, they help to create the sound, and they can help to shape or enhance or change the tonality of the microphone. So one thing that I've always recommended is, hey, your best piece of gear that you can get as a hardware should be some type of preamp that's going to increase the quality of whatever microphones that you have. So one of my favorite 500 series preamps is the Shadow Hills Mono Gamma. I have 2 of them, and I'll tell y'all why at the end, why sometimes buying 2 of the piece of gear can really work in your favor later, right? I'll tell y'all about that in the end of this video. But I'm using the Shadow Hills Mono Gammas, and I love them. It's a super versatile sounding preamp. The transformers, you have multiple different sounds that you can get. It's basically 3 pre's in one. Trust me when I say that. And so depending on which microphone you get and that you connect to it, you can dial up the right sound that works for the record that you're about to record on the Shadow Hills Mono Gammas. Definitely one of my top choices when it comes to preamps. The next thing that I have in my rack here is the Heritage Audio 73 Junior 2. Now, this is a classic 1073 style preamp. The 1073 is like one of the most famous, most beloved preamps for all genres of music, no matter what you're recording. So having the 1073 or a pair of them is actually crucial. And so I would definitely recommend that. If it's not the Heritage Audio, maybe maybe like the Golden Age or even BAE 73s are really good too. All right, now let's talk about something else, because the next thing that I recommend that you do after you get your signal amped up, right? You get your mic signal preamped up, compressing, right? Compressors are all going to be another thing to where we can have a lot of different flavors and style of compressors. One compressor that just hit the market that I'm actually in love with, you all already know, is the Eli Labs. It's called the Pump, right? Now, this is a 500 series compressor that's basically modeled after the Distressor compressor. I've been waiting so long for a 500 series Distressor compressor. That way I can literally pop it into my R6 here and take it anywhere that I need to go. So if I'm doing location recording, or I got a client that wants to record in a hotel room, or we're on tour or whatever, I'm taking a whole powerhouse with me and don't have to worry about big, huge rack units. Like literally I can take this R6 and put it in my carry-on bag and jump on the airplane and have like a monster worth of sound. So the Pump by Eli Labs, I think that's coming soon. I'll leave a link down in the description. And maybe even like the SSL compressor, or even the SSL bus compressor. SSL 6 actually has a really dope channel strip that's a preamp and compressor all in one, which I think is a really dope option for a lot of us. And it's only like $300 too. So you really can't go wrong with that. But yeah, those would be my top 2 compressor choices. A lot of this though is going to depend on the style of music that you're working on and your own personal preference. So I definitely recommend that you do some experimentation, that you try out and listen to as many hardware units as possible, and do your own research so that you can narrow down what you think is going to be important to you as you are building up your 500 series rack. So again, for beginners, I definitely recommend the 500 series is the way to go. Now, before I was telling y'all that I recommend getting two, because here's another little tip. If I get like two preamps or two compressors or whatever it is, because since they're single channel units, I can actually use them to add some saturation or add bus compression over my entire mix. And now we're using our 500 series as like an analog summing mixer, a little summing amp, right? Because basically what I like to do, especially with my Shadow Hills mono gammas, even though they're microphone preamps, I can run line level signal through them and actually just use the transformers to get more saturation and more gain and warmth and texture on my total mix. So what I'll do a lot of times is run the stereo outputs from my mix in my DAW, and then simply run those to the inputs of the mono gammas and back out and back into Pro Tools. And that's how I add a lot of warmth and saturation, by just simply running my mixed signal through the transformers of the preamps on the Shadow Hills mono gamma. You could also probably opt for like a bus compressor. That would be another way to really glue your mix together. In the 500 series, they have a bunch of different offerings on bus compression too. But all of those are not heavy to have to recall. They're not going to take you a lot of time, versus like if you use the outboard compressors for every channel of vocals you have and external reverbs and all of this. Yeah, that's cool, but it's just going to cost you way more money. They'll take you way more time, and also you're going to have to get an interface with enough ins and outs to do all that, when virtually if you just get a 500 series rack that has the patch bay built into it, and like this Rupert Neves R6, you will be golden. And you can have so many different variations of hardware setup. So if you're looking for hardware, I would suggest that you start to look at the 500 series first, where you can get the modules that matter for a budget. Let me know what y'all think about this video, and what 500 series modules do you have or do you want to get? I'm Wavy Wayne from WavyWayne.com. Be dope.